Hello, and welcome to Law Storytime. I'm Claw, and today we're going to go over a new thing I'm going to try. It's called How I Would Have Done It. I do not make movies. I have written some movies, but not sold any movies, and I have made 0 movies. So I feel like I am the authority to tell other people who do make movies how they should have done it. So today we're going to talk about a show that me and my wife just finished called Gotham. And I'm going to tell you how they could have not fucked it up. So, Gotham, if you don't know, it's the pre-Batman story of Gotham. And the first thing is they shoved a ton of villains in there. Way too many villains, and it felt like just callbacks and references to the comic books or TV show, the old animated Batman TV show. But to me, there was just too many. So I went to a Screen Rant article and I found every villain in Gotham, pulled them out, counted them. There's 42. So I'm going to read the list of villains in here. Amygdala, Azrael, Bane, Barbara Keene, Black Mask, Carmen Falcone, Catwoman, Clayface, Copperhead, Cornelius Sturt, The Court of Owls, Dollmaker, Executioner, Electrocutioner, Firefly, Flamingo, Harley Quinn, Hugo Strange, Hush, Jane Doe, Joker, Killer Croc, Mad Hatter, Magpie, Mario Falcone, Mutant Leader, Mr. Freeze, Naza Al Ghul, Ogre, Penguin, Professor Pig, Poison Ivy, Ra's al Ghul, Riddler, Sal Maroni, Scarecrow, Sophia Falcone, Solomon Grundy, Tweedledee and Tweedledum, Two-Face, Ventriloquist, and Scarface. That's one entity. There's my cat. Victor Zsasz. Yeah, the cat really interrupted that flow. Yeah, there's 42 villains. It was just too many, and the thing was, this is my second point, is that none of them had an overarching story, or most of them didn't. And if they had an overarching story, it was over one episode, maybe 2. There was very few points that had you needing to come back every week. It was like each episode was a standalone campaign instead of having like an overarching, this is the bad guy. And with that many villains, it just felt like they were giving too much screen time to everyone. I think it would have been better if they had limited the villains and then made them more gravitas, because they didn't really feel like villains at the end. In fact, they all teamed together at the end to save Gotham. Spoilers, I should have said that first. If you're watching this and didn't watch Gotham, then sorry. But they so they just didn't do anything. Like The Walking Dead would have huge arcs of these villains, and it made the villains more villainous. But when you have so many and they're all a threat, then there's no real single entity to put your anger, hatred in. Like, there's no Negan on Gotham. And they tried, but they tried it with all of the villains. My second point, or my third point, it needed to be more grounded. It started as a pretty realistic show, kind of like the Batman Begins trilogy from Christopher Nolan. I was thinking Edward Norton, and that was not Edward Norton. That was Christopher Nolan. So they started, and it's a crime drama. It's a crime drama with supervillains is basically what it is, and there's not Batman. It's Jim Gordon, who I'm sure if you know Batman, he becomes Commissioner Gordon, but it's his story basically. And they didn't really focus much on his story, but I'll talk about that in a minute. But they should have done either like an SVU where each week it's a different criminal, they're going to go find it, and something weird happens because people love SVU. Or they should have done an overarching plot where this is the big bad, these are the little bads, and they're taking down the little bads trying to get to the big bad, and then you can switch up your supervillains at that point. Like Victor Zsasz is a terrible person in the comic books. He stabs people and then he cuts himself. with all the marks of people he killed. But in Gotham, he pretty much turns into the comic relief. He's not even threatening anymore. And they all kind of do. There's no real threat. And it turns into a lot of murder. A lot of people getting shot. And not a whole lot of police work. There's not like putting clues together. Which, that's a Batman thing. And that's a detective thing. You could have merged those two into some sort of cohesive SVU with supervillains. But it wasn't that. It was more just a whole cast of character, almost an ensemble of crime drama. It wasn't super drama-y either. It was more gritty for the sake of gritty. So, one point that I'm talking about in here is that the realness of it really went out the window fast. So, there were at least 3 different villains who had different mind control substances that could make anyone do whatever they wanted. And at some point, I think they were all going to drop it on the city. Right? Batman, Tim Burton, his Batman. The first one, the Joker wants to drop the fear toxin over there. But yeah, there was the Poison Ivy had her stuff, who ended up becoming the Joker, had a fear toxin developed by Scarecrow. And then the Mad Hatter, also he could hypnotize people, but it worked on everyone, like to the point where they would kill themselves or others, which isn't how hypnotizing works. There was also this thing where if you got shot, it didn't matter. Almost everyone who got shot comes back to life. I'm trying to think, and there's not one person. One lady's shot in the head, and she's in a coma. And, I understand people get shot in the head and go into comas, but everyone in the show has been shot. There's not a single person in the show who wasn't shot. And actually, there's one point where Alfred is stabbed, and it comes in, there is a resurrection potion. And the resurrection potion, the first thing I thought of was, this should be in a hospital. Once it's been discovered, they need to get this to a hospital. Start bringing people back to life. But no, they don't do that. They leave it in some dark, ancient crypt of some guy who's been around since the Middle Ages. Or the Crusades. I guess that was the Middle Ages. Was the Crusades the Middle Ages? You're not going to answer me. You're a camera. Then the other thing is, there wasn't enough focus in the later seasons on the crime families. They pretty much just went away, and I think that should have been your bread and butter. Instead of having, the Riddler always fighting with Penguin or whoever. Everyone was constantly bickering, which we'll talk about in a minute. But you could have just had them, the supervillains, as enforcers for the different crime families. I know it doesn't go to the comic books, but you're not making a comic book. You're making a TV show. And there has to be some point where you go, this is not for the comic book fans. This is for people who like the TV show. And it just felt like they were trying to appease too many people and follow too many storylines. My cat just scratched me. Too many storylines at one time, instead of focusing on like a real cohesive story. This next one's going to be a little controversial, but I think there should have been more Batman or less Bruce Wayne. So it starts off that Jim Gordon is the focal point. It is Jim Gordon's story, and I like that. That's what they should have done, but then it becomes all these other mini side stories, and it slowly transitions to Bruce Wayne becoming Batman, but it takes forever. And again, spoilers. I'll try to remember to put something on the front that says spoiler warning. But, Bruce becomes super unlikable. Like, he's just unbearable in the show. There's no real thing to really make him likable, and you're just waiting the whole show to be like, where is Batman? Right? Because every time you see Bruce, you're like, where is Batman? And I'm not saying Bruce shouldn't have been in it, but he definitely shouldn't have been a main character. he's an indiscriminate age. They treat him like he's a teenager, but then he buys a club and starts drinking in it. And then he has to file for emancipation from Alfred. So it's like this whole weird, what age is he sort of thing. And then, the last episode, again, spoilers, Batman shows up. It's 10 years later. Batman shows up. It's Batman's first time in Gotham. Bruce is back after 10 years, and Batman shows up. And it was great. It was a great episode. It was probably the best episode. Because it's Batman, but they don't really show you him too much. They have little camera tricks where he's causing fear. He catches Penguin and the Joker. Then he's up on a building. And I think they stayed on him too long. But he's up on a building. And the other thing is like the grounded arc things. He always had this real weird on again, off again thing with Selena Kyle, who is another main star of the show. And I could have done with more of that, longer of that, or none of it. And Bruce would just be a side character where you don't ever see him training. You just see the results of his training. Another thing is I think they did a really poor job with the Joker. The Joker, to me, his whole horror thing is that no one knows where he came from. Nobody knows why he's doing it. He has no motive. But there was a complete backstory and motive for Joker. And I think what they should have done is the character who you think is going to be Joker, he just, he dies. And, or he's, he lets it go on people and then dies, the fear toxin, or he also falls into the vat of chemical. So another call back, but yeah, I would have just had the Joker be somebody who's never on screen, and then just just have a little laugh, right? And yeah, because we've seen what it could do to normal people, so that's what I would have done. The other one is that there's no likable characters. And there's no peaceful, likable moments. There's nothing that makes you really like these characters. I don't like a single one. Maybe Harvey, and he's like a cop. He's like a crooked cop who turns clean. But they're just unlikable, and they are always bickering. Always. There's always some fight where alliances are broken, and they're always fighting. And there's just no moments where you sit back and you're like, that was a good moment. That is a happy moment. And I think The Walking Dead does that better than anyone else. The reason I referenced The Walking Dead is they did a comic book right. They did it perfect. They didn't stick directly to the comic book. They adapted as they needed to for the screen. But one thing that they do is when there's been a huge battle and a huge win, they take time to celebrate with their friends and family. And the same thing I was saying about the villains, where because you have so many villains, none of them are likable. It's the same thing with the good guys, is that because there's no victory, you're not ever celebrating anything with them. They're just people on a screen. And, if one of them dies, you're like, oh, well, he'll be back in the resurrection potion. But if he's not, it's not that big of a deal. But who am I to say? It had 5 seasons. It had tons of episodes. It is an entertaining watch. I wouldn't binge it like I did. But, catch a few episodes, especially the last one. The last one's a really good episode. And, yeah. Until that time, thanks for watching. If they reboot Gotham, hit me up. Go to my website. You can contact me there. Fox. Go ahead, Warner Brothers, whoever. I got ideas. But yeah, until next time, keep writing.